When I saw that little girl's face, I knew. Not because she looked like him, but because she looked like me. I remember standing there on the edge of the playground, the winter wind nipping at my fingers as I wrapped my coat tighter. Children were running, laughing, throwing snow at each other, their voices sharp against the cold. I was just there to drop off my niece, nothing more. But when I turned, when my eyes landed on her, everything around me seemed to still. She couldn't have been more than 6, a small, bright thing with big, honey-brown eyes and a nervous little smile. But it wasn't her face that stopped me. It was the way her mouth curved when she laughed, the tilt of her head, the tiny furrow between her brows when she was thinking. All of it him. And something inside me whispered, this isn't a coincidence. I stood frozen as she ran into the arms of another woman, a young mother, maybe early 30s, with tired eyes and a warm smile. I don't know why I stared so long, but when that woman noticed me watching, she gave a polite nod. I nodded back, my heart pounding so loudly I thought it might give me away. When I got back into my car, my hands were shaking so hard I could barely fit the key into the ignition. Because in that little girl's face, I saw the ghost of a secret my husband had been carrying for years. One I never even thought to look for. Normal life/setup. Before that day, I would have told you I knew my husband through and through. Elias and I had been married 12 years. We weren't perfect. Who is? But we had built something solid, something I thought was honest. We met when I was 26, fresh out of grad school, juggling 2 part-time jobs and a head full of hope. He was steady, quiet, dependable. The kind of man who didn't speak much but made you feel safe when he did. We built a home in the suburbs, one of those modest brick houses with creaky floors and too many picture frames. We never had children, not for lack of trying, just life's way, I guess. After a while we stopped talking about it. We filled the silence with work, dinners, weekend drives, and Sunday church. Our mornings were always the same. I'd be in the kitchen by 7, brewing his coffee just the way he liked. Strong, 2 sugars, a splash of cream. He'd kiss my cheek, smell faintly of cedarwood and toothpaste and say, "You spoil me, Mia." I'd laugh and tell him someone had to. We had routines, rituals, quiet comfort. That's why the thought that he might have been hiding something, anything, never crossed my mind. Elias worked in logistics, managing shipments and schedules for a mid-sized company. Sometimes he traveled, but never for long. I trusted him. He wasn't the type for secrets. At least, that's what I told myself. Looking back, I can see all the small things I ignored. The phone calls he'd take outside. The nights he said he was working late. The way he'd sometimes stare at his phone, then clear his throat and tuck it away. They were just flashes of oddness in an otherwise ordinary marriage. We all have those, don't we? Little things that don't make sense until much later. That winter was cold in more ways than one. My sister, Lila, had gone back to work after a long maternity leave, and I helped her by picking up her daughter, Chloe, from kindergarten a few days a week. Elias had been distant lately, not angry, not cruel, just distracted. I chalked it up to stress. He'd been talking about a big project at work, one that might finally earn him the promotion he'd been chasing for years. It was one of those afternoons, waiting outside the school for Chloe, that I saw the little girl. And that moment, it changed everything I thought I knew about love, about honesty, about the quiet ways a heart can break without making a sound. At the first clue/suspicion beginning. That night, I couldn't shake her face from my mind. Elias was in his recliner, half watching some documentary, his glasses slipping down his nose. I studied him the way you do when you're trying to see something hidden. Like maybe if you looked long enough, the truth would blink. Do you ever think about kids? I asked casually. He looked over, brow raised. Sometimes, he said softly. Why? I don't know. Just wondering. He smiled faintly. That same tired warmth that used to comfort me. You'd have been a wonderful mother, he murmured, reaching over to squeeze my hand. The words should have felt sweet. But something about the way he said them, past tense, sent a quiet chill through me. Later, when he went to bed, I lingered in the living room. His phone sat on the arm of the recliner, screen lighting up with a faint buzz. My chest tightened. I had never, not once in 12 years, gone through his phone. It wasn't how I was raised. But that night, curiosity felt like hunger, sharp and undeniable. I didn't look. Not yet. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks, that maybe I'd imagined the resemblance. But the seed was planted. And seeds like that, they grow. 2 days later, while picking up Chloe, I saw her again. The same little girl, the same woman. Only this time, the woman looked upset. She was on the phone, pacing near her car, whispering harshly into the receiver. And then I heard it. "Elle, please, you can't just ignore me about this. Elias." My stomach dropped. The name could have been anyone's. It's not uncommon. But the way she said it, the frustration, the intimacy, it sounded too close, too personal. I watched her hang up, scoop up the little girl, and drive off in an old blue sedan. I memorized the license plate without even realizing it. That night I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. My mind replayed her voice again and again. By morning, I'd decided to find out the truth. Whatever it was. I told myself I'd start small. Just look up the license plate. Just to ease my mind. But the thing about looking for the truth is, once you start digging, you can't control what you unearth. That I didn't even know how to begin. I'm not the type to snoop or pry. I've always believed that if you need to spy on someone, the relationship is already gone. But that morning, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, staring at a search bar like it was a mirror. My heart thudded as I typed the numbers I'd written down. The license plate. It led nowhere at first. Just a vague record from a car registration site that said the vehicle was owned by someone named Julia Mercer. The name meant nothing to me. Or at least, it didn't yet. Elias came into the kitchen as I was closing the laptop. "Morning," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," I replied, forcing a smile. He leaned down and kissed my forehead. "You should get some rest. You look tired." He meant it kindly, but the word stung. Tired. Yes, but not from sleep. From pretending. From trying to quiet the voice that whispered, "He's hiding something." The rest of that week felt strange, like living inside a photograph. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt real. Elias left for work, came home, asked about my day. I smiled, nodded, made dinner. But every time his phone buzzed, I noticed. Every time he hesitated before answering, I felt my chest tighten. On Friday evening, he said he'd be home late again. "We're finalizing shipment schedules," he said, grabbing his jacket. "Might be a long one tonight." I nodded, pretending to scroll through my phone. "No problem. Drive safe." But the moment the door closed, I grabbed my keys. Something in me had snapped, a quiet, determined kind of desperation. I wasn't going to sit in that house another night wondering who Julia Mercer was, and why her child had my husband's smile, that I didn't have a plan. I just knew I had to see that. I drove across town, back to the school, hoping for some sign of that woman, that little girl. It was almost 6, the playground empty, the classrooms dark. For a moment, I wondered what I was even doing there. Then I spotted her car, the blue sedan, parked at the curb near the small apartments down the block. I parked across the street and waited. I told myself I'd leave after a few minutes, but time blurred. After a while, she appeared, Julia. She was carrying grocery bags, her daughter skipping beside her. She looked tired, like someone who carried too much on her back and didn't have a hand free to set it down. They went inside the second-floor unit. The lights came on, warm and soft. Through the window, I saw the girl climb onto the couch, hugging a stuffed bear. Julia knelt, brushing the child's hair from her face, and then her phone rang. She picked it up, hesitated, then answered. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. Her face said it all. The mixture of longing and pain, the kind of expression you wear when you're speaking to someone you're not supposed to miss. When she hung up, she pressed the phone to her lips and closed her eyes. And that was when I knew, not the details, not the timeline, but the truth. Elias wasn't working late. He was here, with them. I sat there for what felt like hours. At one point, I realized I was gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles had turned white. But I didn't cry. Not yet. The tears would come later, when I let myself fall apart. For now I was just hollow. When I finally drove home, the house felt foreign, too quiet, too tidy. The framed photo of our wedding on the mantel seemed to mock me. I picked it up, traced his smile with my thumb and whispered, "Why?" He came home past midnight. I heard the door click, the sound of his shoes on the floor. I sat on the couch, waiting. He froze when he saw me. "Hey," he said, his voice careful. "You're up." "Where were you?" "Work," he said without a pause. Too quick. Too easy. I smiled, but it felt like my face might crack. "At this hour?" "Yeah. We had a shipment delay. I told you it might be a long night." I nodded slowly. "Right. You did." He hesitated. "Mia, what's wrong?" I looked up at him, my eyes burning but dry. "Who is Julia Mercer?" He went completely still. For a second, I thought maybe he didn't hear me. Then I saw it, the smallest flicker in his eyes, a flinch, like he'd been struck. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said too quickly. "Don't," I whispered. "Don't lie to me again." He stared at me, his jaw tightening. "Again?" I let out a shaky breath. "I saw her. The woman. The child. The little girl who looks just like you, Elias. Don't you dare tell me you don't know what I'm talking about." For a long moment he said nothing. Just stood there, breathing, rubbing the back of his neck like he always did when he was cornered. Finally he sat down across from me. "Mia, it's not what you think." I laughed, a small broken sound. "Then please tell me what it is." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes downcast. "She's my daughter," he said softly. The room went silent. My ears rang. My vision blurred. The only word that made it through was daughter. I don't understand," I said, my voice trembling. "You said you didn't have any children." "I didn't, he exhaled. "She's from before us, Mia. Before we got married. I didn't know about her until a few years ago." "A few years?" My voice cracked. "And you never told me?" I didn't know how. His voice was quiet, pleading. "It wasn't an affair, I swear to you. Julia and I were together before you and I even met. She never told me she was pregnant. When she reached out." "When she reached out?" I interrupted, my hands shaking. "How long ago?" "About 5 years." 5 years. 5 years of lies. Of dinners and birthdays and anniversaries. "Why, Elias?" I whispered. "Why hide this from me?" He looked at me then, eyes full of something I couldn't name. "Because I was scared. I thought if you knew, you'd see me differently. You'd think I betrayed you." I stared at him, my throat tight. "You didn't betray me by having a child before me, Elias. You betrayed me by lying." He reached out, but I flinched back. "Don't." For the first time in our marriage, I saw something I'd never seen in him before. Not guilt, not shame, but defeat. He said quietly, "I just wanted to protect what we had." I stood up, my voice calm but sharp. "Then you should have trusted it enough to tell me the truth." He didn't follow me when I went to the bedroom. Didn't say another word. But as I closed the door behind me, I knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of finding out what other truths he'd buried. And what it would cost to dig them up. That I barely slept that night. The bed felt too big, too cold. Like every inch between us was filled with something sharp and invisible. I could hear Elias pacing in the living room long after midnight. Every creak of the floorboards was a reminder that he was there. And yet somehow already gone. Around 3 a.m., I finally got up. I found him sitting on the couch, elbows on his knees, his wedding ring glinting in the soft light from the lamp. He looked up when I entered. "Mia," he said quietly, "please sit down." I didn't. I stayed standing, arms folded. "Tell me everything. No more half-truths." He nodded, eyes hollow. "Julia and I were together when I was 25. It wasn't serious. We dated for a few months. She ended things, said she wasn't ready for anything long-term. I never heard from her again. Then about 5 years ago, she contacted me. Said she needed to talk." He paused, swallowing hard. "She told me about Lily. Our daughter. Said she hadn't planned to tell me, but Lily was asking questions about her father. She thought it was time." I could feel my pulse in my throat. "So you met her?" He nodded. "Yes. I met her. Just once at first. Then more often. I wanted to help. To be part of her life somehow. Julia never asked for money, not at first. She just wanted Lily to know who I was." My voice trembled. "And you thought you could keep that a secret from your wife?" He looked up at me, eyes glassy. I thought I could manage both worlds. I thought if I told you, you'd see it as a betrayal. That maybe you'd think I loved you less because I had a child with someone else. I shook my head slowly. You didn't give me a chance to prove otherwise. Silence settled between us. Not the comfortable kind we used to share, the kind that suffocates. I whispered, "How many times have you seen her?" He hesitated. "A few times a month. Sometimes I help with school things. I just wanted to do right by her." I sank into the chair across from him, my whole body trembling. 5 years, Elias. 5 years of keeping another family from me. He reached for me again, voice breaking. "Mia, it wasn't another family. It was just unfinished responsibility. I never meant to hurt you." But that was the thing about lies. You never mean for them to hurt, until they do. I got up, walked to the window, and pressed my hand against the cold glass. Outside, the street was still and quiet, like it was holding its breath for us. "I need space," I whispered. He stood, panic flashing across his face. "Please don't leave. Let's talk about this." "I am talking," I said sharply, turning to him. "You made decisions for both of us. You built a lie and invited me to live inside it. I can't just stay here and pretend I don't see the cracks." He dropped his gaze. "Where will you go?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe to Lila's for a while." When I packed a small bag, he didn't stop me. He stood in the doorway, silent, tears glinting in his eyes but never falling. As I walked out, he whispered, "I love you, Mia." I didn't respond. Because love, I realized, isn't the same as trust. And sometimes love is the easier thing to lose. Lila's house was small and warm, always smelling of baby powder and cinnamon. She opened the door in her robe, confusion turning to concern the moment she saw my face. "Mia? What happened?" I couldn't even get the words out. I just shook my head and let her pull me inside. She didn't push. She just made tea, set it in front of me, and waited. I told her everything, from the playground to the confession. She listened quietly, her expression soft but furious. "That bastard," she whispered when I finished. I laughed weakly. "He didn't cheat, Lila." She snorted. "He lied. That's worse sometimes." I nodded, staring into my tea. "He said he was afraid I'd think differently of him." "Well," she said, "he's right about one thing. You'll never see him the same again." The next few days were a blur of silence and small motions. Folding laundry, helping Chloe with homework, pretending to eat. I didn't call Elias and he didn't call me. But one afternoon, a letter arrived. Handwritten. His handwriting. I stared at it for hours before opening it. "Mia, I know I've broken something precious between us. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to understand that Lily is innocent. She didn't ask for this. She just wants a father. I want to be honest now, about everything. I'll tell you anything you want to know, if you'll let me." Elias, I read it 3 times. The part that caught me wasn't the apology, it was the line about the child. She's innocent. Because she was. None of this was her fault. That night, I found myself staring at the ceiling, thinking of that little girl's face. How she'd smiled, how she'd looked so happy to run into her mother's arms. And for the first time, I didn't just feel betrayal. I felt sorrow. For her. For me. For all of us. The next morning, I called Elias. "We need to talk." I said that. He sounded surprised, relieved even. "Yes. Please." We met at a cafe halfway between my sister's house and ours. It was quiet, tucked away, the kind of place we used to go to when we were first dating. When he saw me, he stood, nervous, like he didn't know if he was allowed to touch me anymore. I sat down without a word. He cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming." "I didn't do it for you," I said softly. "I did it because I deserve answers." He nodded, hands clasped tightly together. "Ask me anything." So I did. "How long were you planning to keep it secret?" He sighed. "I don't know. Every time I wanted to tell you, something stopped me. I kept convincing myself I'd find the right moment. But there's no right moment to drop a bomb like that." I looked down at my cup. "Did you ever think about what that secret did to me? Even before I knew it, the distance, the lies. I thought you'd fallen out of love with me. He winced. I never stopped loving you. I just didn't know how to love both of you without losing you. The honesty in his voice stung. It was the first real truth he'd given me in years. I took a deep breath. I want to see her. He looked up sharply. Lily. Yes, I said, my voice steady. If we're going to move forward, whatever that means, I need to see the truth with my own eyes. Not as your wife, just as me. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. If you're sure. I'm sure. Because sometimes facing the truth head-on is the only way to find out whether there's anything left to save. That we arranged to meet that Saturday at a small park near the edge of town. Neutral ground, Elias had called it. The kind of place with wooden benches, ducks on the pond, and the smell of pine and sunscreen mingling in the air. I got there first. The morning sun had just started to warm the air, and children's laughter echoed from the playground. It hit me. How ordinary everything looked. As if the world didn't know it was about to tilt. When Elias arrived, he looked nervous, hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets. Walking beside him was the woman, Julia, and the little girl holding her hand. My heart raced. Julia looked different up close. Her features softer than I remembered, her eyes cautious but kind. She gave me a small, polite nod. Mia, right? I nodded, unable to find words. My throat was tight, but I managed a quiet, yes. Elias knelt beside the little girl. Lily, he said gently. This is a friend of Daddy's. Friend. The word hit like a small knife. But I understood why he said it. How do you explain to a child the mess adults make of honesty? Lily smiled shyly. Hi, she said, her voice as soft as a breeze. I smiled back. Hi, sweetheart. We all sat at a picnic table, the silence heavy but not unkind. Lily began feeding crumbs to the ducks, her laughter spilling into the air like bells. It was impossible not to be drawn to her. She had that same half-grin Elias wore when he thought no one was watching. Julia cleared her throat. I wasn't sure this was a good idea, she said quietly. But I appreciate you coming. I looked at her, measuring the woman who had, unknowingly, upended my life. It's not your fault, I said. He should have told me. Years ago. Her eyes softened. He said you were kind. I can see why. That word, kind, nearly broke me. We spoke for a while, mostly about Lily. Her love for drawing, her obsession with chocolate chip pancakes, the way she always tried to fix everyone's problems with band-aids. Simple things, human things. Things I could have loved her for, if life had been different. When they left, Lily waved at me from the car window. Bye, Miss Mia. I waved back, a lump rising in my throat. Bye, sweetheart. After they drove away, I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty parking lot. It was strange, I didn't feel anger anymore. Just an ache, deep and wide, like the space where something used to be and could never quite fit again. That night, when Elias called, I picked up. She's lovely, I said softly. He exhaled, relief flooding his voice. Thank you. That means more than you know. I'm not saying everything's okay, I said quickly. It's not. But I see her now. And I understand what's at stake. There was silence. Then he said, Mia, I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust back. I mean that. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But trust isn't something you earn with promises. It's built in the small, quiet moments when no one's watching. The ones he'd already spent years destroying. Still, something inside me softened. Not forgiveness, not yet, just possibility. Secrets have a way of slipping out, even when no one intends them to. It started when my mother called one afternoon. Her voice was bright at first, but then she asked, Honey, is everything all right between you and Elias? I froze. Why do you ask? Oh, nothing. It's just, I saw Julia at church last Sunday. She was talking to Mrs. Kent, mentioned something about Elias helping out with his daughter's fundraiser. I didn't realize he had a child. My heart sank. Why that evening, the whispers had already begun. Small town talk travels faster than wildfire. And ours was the kind of community where everyone knew who planted which flowers in whose yard. At the grocery store, I caught people glancing, lowering their voices when I passed. One woman, a neighbor I'd shared casseroles with for years, smiled too sweetly and said, "You're such a saint, Mia. Most women wouldn't stand by after something like that." Her tone made my stomach turn. I wanted to scream that I wasn't standing by, that I was just trying to breathe. But instead I nodded politely and left my cart half full in the aisle. That night, Elias called again. He'd heard too. "I'm sorry," he said. "Julia didn't mean for it to get out. Lily mentioned me at church and..." I sighed. "It's not about who said what, Elias. It's about what you didn't say for years." He went quiet, then asked, "Are people bothering you?" "They're curious," I said, "and cruel in that gentle way people can be." He exhaled. "Do you want me to come over?" "No," I said firmly. "Not yet. I need to handle this myself." And I did. The next Sunday, I went to church alone, head high, back straight. When the whispers started, I met each pair of eyes with calm steadiness. I smiled, sat down, sang the hymns, because shame only sticks if you let it. By the time service ended, the gossip had quieted. No one quite knew how to react to a woman who refused to bow her head. Later that week, Julia called. "I wanted to apologize," she said softly. "I never meant for any of this to spill into your life." "It's already my life," I replied. "We're all tangled in it now." She hesitated. "If it helps, Lily keeps talking about you. She said you smiled at her like a mom." That stopped me cold. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then I said, barely above a whisper, "Tell her she has a wonderful mother already." When I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. There were tears, not of anger this time, but something closer to acceptance. Because even though I hadn't chosen this truth, I realized I couldn't unsee it. And maybe, just maybe, I didn't want to. Months passed. Time, as it always does, softened the edges. Elias and I started counseling. It wasn't easy. Therapy rarely is. Some days, I wanted to walk out and never look back. Other days, I found small glimpses of the man I fell in love with. The one who'd once made me feel safe. He didn't make excuses anymore. He listened. He showed up. And slowly, I began to see effort where there used to be silence. One evening, as we left the counselor's office, he turned to me. "Mia, I want you to be part of Lily's life. Not because I expect it, but because she keeps asking about you." I paused. "She does?" He nodded. "She drew a picture of you. Said you looked like sunshine." The lump in my throat returned, heavier this time. "She doesn't even know me." "Maybe she sees something in you I lost sight of," he said softly. For the first time in a long while, I smiled, faint but real. That night, I took a deep breath and looked at our wedding photo again. The same photo I'd almost thrown away months before. I didn't feel the same ache anymore. The pain hadn't vanished, but it had changed, like a scar, healed but always there to remind you where you've been. I realized then that healing isn't about erasing what happened. It's about learning to live with the truth, and finding a way to breathe again through it. Spring came early that year. The snow melted before March was halfway through, leaving behind small rivers that ran down the edges of the sidewalks. The world felt new again, wet, fragile, trying its best to bloom. Elias and I weren't perfect. We still argued sometimes about the past, about the things we couldn't fix. But we also talked more than we ever had before. Real talk, not small talk, not polite silence. Some evenings, we sat in the kitchen with cups of tea, no television, no distractions. Just words. Some of them painful, some of them healing. One night, I asked, "Do you ever wish you hadn't met her again? That you'd never found out about Lily?" He looked down thinking. "No," he said finally. "Because she deserves to know where she comes from. And because maybe this was life's way of forcing me to be honest, even when it cost me everything." I nodded, tracing the rim of my mug. "And us?" He smiled faintly. "I don't know yet. But I hope there's still in us to figure out." I wanted to be angry, but I wasn't. I was just tired of living in anger. So instead, I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine. "There's still in us," I said quietly. "But it's not the same one we started with. We'll have to build a new version." He nodded. "Then let's start there." A few weeks later, Julia invited us, to Lily's school art show. It was small. Just rows of colorful drawings hung along the gym walls. But for her, it was a big day. I hesitated at first. But Elias looked at me and said, "You don't have to come if it's too hard." I thought about that little girl's smile, about the innocence in her eyes, and I said, "I'll be there." When we arrived, Lily spotted us immediately. "Daddy," she called, running over, her little hands clutching a piece of paper covered in paint. Elias knelt, smiling, pride softening his face in a way I hadn't seen in years. "Hey, sweetheart. What did you make?" She grinned. "A family." I froze, half a step behind him, unsure where to stand. But then she turned to me, holding up the paper. 4 stick figures, 1 tall man, 1 woman with curly hair, 1 little girl, and a dog. "That's you," she said, pointing at the woman. "You came to the park. You fed the ducks." I blinked back, tears, smiling. "It's beautiful, Lily." Julia approached then, offering me a quiet smile. "She talks about you a lot," she said. "I think you made an impression." I looked at the child again, her big brown eyes, her soft voice. Maybe in another life she could have been mine. But in this one, all I could do was love her in the space that existed, small, careful, real. When we left, Elias took my hand in the car. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For showing up." I looked out the window, the spring wind ruffling my hair. "We're all just trying to show up, Elias. For someone, somehow." He nodded, and we drove home in quiet peace. The months that followed were gentler. We took it slow. Counseling, dinner dates, evenings spent tending the small garden behind our house. There was laughter again, not constant, but enough. Sometimes, I'd still think about the years of lies. The hidden visits, the silence that sat between us like a wall. And yes, it still hurt. But I'd learned something through all of it. Pain doesn't mean the end. Sometimes it's the start of truth. The months that followed were gentler. We took it slow. Counseling, dinner dates, evenings spent tending the small garden behind our house. There was laughter again, not constant, but enough. Sometimes, I'd still think about the years of lies. The hidden visits, the silence that sat between us like a wall. And yes, it still hurt. But I'd learned something through all of it. Pain doesn't mean the end. Sometimes it's the start of truth. Forgiveness didn't come in a grand moment. It came in fragments, in shared coffee cups, in small apologies, in the way he started telling me everything, even the things that didn't matter. And one night, months later, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Elias said quietly, "You know, for years I thought love was about keeping things perfect. About protecting you from the messy parts. I was wrong. Love's the opposite, isn't it?" I smiled faintly. It is. Love is letting someone see the mess, and trusting they won't run away. He reached for my hand, and this time, I didn't pull back. That it's been 3 years now since that winter afternoon on the playground. Lily is older. She calls me Miss Mia still, but sometimes she slips and just says Mia. We bake cookies together on the weekends when she visits, and every time she smiles, I remember the girl I used to be. The one who thought her marriage was built on certainty. Now I know better. Marriage isn't about certainty. It's about choosing, again and again, to stay, to grow, to forgive, even when you have every reason not to. Elias and I aren't perfect. We probably never will be. But when he looks at me now, I see no secrets hiding behind his eyes. And maybe that's enough. Sometimes I still think back to that moment, standing by the playground fence, seeing that little girl's face for the first time. How the world tilted, and everything I believed about my life shifted with it. I thought I was losing everything that day. But maybe I was just learning what love really costs, and what it's worth when you fight to keep it honest. So tell me, if you were in my shoes, would you have stayed? Would you have forgiven a man who lied? Not out of malice, but out of fear? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if my story meant something to you, don't forget to follow, to share, to remind someone else that healing is possible, even after betrayal. Because sometimes the truth doesn't destroy us. It rebuilds us, piece by piece.